Afternoon, good evening, everyone. Thanks a lot for coming. I appreciate it. For those I haven't met, I think I've met a good hunk of you, but for those of you I haven't met, my name is Gordon Gray. I'm the Kuwait professor of Gulf and Arabian Peninsula Affairs here at the Elliott School at GW. Want to welcome all of you to our second Middle East Policy Forum event of 2025. And I want to note, as I try and remember to do each time, that these events are made possible thanks to a generous gift from the ExxonMobil Corporation. This is a super important topic, one that's been important for a long time and will continue to be important. So I appreciate your coming out this evening, notwithstanding the temperature, and same to all of our people watching online. You know, it's probably warmer where they are. I want to thank our guest who's traveled from Boston, and I'll introduce him in just a minute. Christian, thanks as always for putting this all together. Before I get to the introduction, I want to invite everyone to our next Middle East Policy Forum event, which is March 25th, also a Tuesday, here in this room at 1:30. We'll hear from leaders of a number of NGOs, including Ahmed East, Education for Employment, and the Tunisian American Young Professionals Association on U.S. support for education and entrepreneurship in the Middle East and North Africa. And as far as this evening's topic on the subject of rebuilding democracy in the Arab world, I can't think of a better person to address the issue than our guest, Dr. Youssef Chahed, who's joining us from the Belfer Center at Harvard. My colleague, or I guess former colleague and still friend, and I, Ian McCary, first met Dr. Chahed over 15 years ago, and his intellect and seriousness of purpose impressed both of us. Ian, I'm not sure I told you that I knew he was going to be Prime Minister in 7 years. I may have forgotten to say that, but actually I didn't say that, truth be told. That was not envisioned in Ben Ali's Tunisia, but as we'll hear shortly, revolutions have a way of turning things upside down. And Dr. Chahed went on to become, if I'm not mistaken, the youngest head of government in Tunisian history, and certainly the longest serving prime minister since the revolution in 2011. While he was prime minister, he worked a lot on and made significant strides in the fight against terrorism, which was unfortunately a major issue right before he became prime minister. Launched an anti-corruption campaign, and also with his economic background, navigated those economic challenges as well. And rather than go on and on about you, I will turn the floor over to you, and I know we all look forward to hearing what you have to say.
Thank you, Ambassador. Thank you very much for the invitation and for the warm welcome. I'm deeply honored to be here and to see so many, to see the students first and to see a lot of friends here in this prestigious place. I hope I will try to help the students to better understand the situation in the region and the challenges to build a democracy in what I'm calling a hard place for democracy, which is the Arab world. And yes, I'm ready to answer your questions.
Great.
And by the way, Ian was traveling to Maldives during the revolution.
Highlight.
That's great.
We wanted to make sure we had an outside perspective on everything that was
Yeah, with the conspiracy theory now, you know, everything.
that was going on at the time. I guess Maybe we can start out with, if you want to take a look at what's going on in Syria, what we saw there, and what lessons you draw about the fall of Bashar. What are the parallels with the fall of Ben Ali? What are the differences? And how do you see the way going forward?
Yeah. I believe, I think the fall of Bashar al-Assad, and the first lesson that we can learn is that all dictatorships are stable until the last 15 minutes. This is a message of hope for all people living in the dictatorship. Because no one was expecting that Bashar al-Assad regime will collapse in 2 or 3 weeks. And there was no real confrontation between Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, HTS, and the army, the Syrian army. It was more the self-dislocation of the regime in 2 or 3 weeks that happened. And the lesson is that no regime can sustain if your population, your whole population was exiled or displaced, or unlike Ben Ali or Mubarak or Gaddafi, that has to act in like a few weeks. Bashar al-Assad got like 10 years or more than that to try to make a consensus, to open make some political achievement for integrate the different factions in his country. But his only goal was just how to sustain in power, how to remain in power. And even the Russian or the Iranian cover were not enough to help him and to make him. So no cover can help you to remain in power if your own population, millions of Syrians were displaced and exiled, 10 million, including the people exiled in their own country. So, but then I think now the problem with these regimes is the fact when they fall and when they collapse, they let the political class that is not prepared to manage such a difficult transition. And this is why revolutions always, there is a hope in those revolutions, but always they failed because those dictatorship regime, they didn't let the political class or political actors to emerge. Maybe you can have a political class that is confronting the dictatorship. And this is what happened in Tunisia, by the way. When Ben Ali left, we were not prepared for that. We were thinking that this is a very strong regime with strong party, controlling everything, security forces. And so we were not prepared for that. So then managing a transition to democracy is something very difficult, especially that the political class that is in charge of that is not prepared, because confronting the dictator is something, but then driving and managing a country with a vision and leadership, fixing governance issues is something else. And this is what happened in Tunisia, I believe, and we did a lot of mistakes at the beginning of after the revolution of 2011, and some of the mistakes that impacted the transition period, and we continue to have them until today.
A lot of people have, over the years, and I think this intensified with President Said's power grab, going on 4 years ago now, 3.5 years ago, have said that the Arab Spring is finished. It wasn't a success. It was doomed to failure. Would you agree with that? Would you disagree with that? And what's your reasoning, one way or the other?
I mean, again, it was something was not predictable. What happened in Tunisia and then in Egypt, and how it spread to other countries. Like, I consider in Tunisia we have very rich experience in the democratic decade. There are a lot of lessons learned, including for the current Syrian revolution. There was a lot of mistakes also. As I mentioned, we were unprepared. And I think there are lessons learned also for the international community who tried to support the Tunisian democracy, but maybe we can discuss how the support was. Maybe it was unless what it was expected. I remember I remember Deauville. You remember Deauville?
Yes.
We were announcing $80 billion to Tunisia and Egypt. And every time I say that, first time I arrived to my office after I was appointed Prime Minister, I was looking to this money. So but then I didn't find this money. I think the West did not pay enough attention. But again, it's not the responsibility of the West what happened if the experience failed in Tunisia. Our own mistakes as Tunisian political class. What I'm trying to do now is trying to analyze the behavior of several political actors during the decade. And I consider that this behavior was positive, and this what helped the Tunisian experience to exist for, if you go back to 2011, I think most of the experts and the researchers were not giving any chance to the Tunisian experience to survive, because if you see a researcher, Tunisia was not meeting the prerequisite conditions for a democracy to succeed. If you look to the revenue per capita, was less than $4,000, I believe. So, but then I consider it survived for 10 years at least. There was free and fair elections. No one was contesting the elections. There was freedom, civil rights, a lot of progress in public and individual freedoms. There was many positive things, but now if you talk about this period as a decade period, of course it's wrong. But if there was mistakes, I think we could do much better. We could avoid these mistakes. And by the way, the Syrian needs to do that, what I call the startup mistakes. For example, I'll give you one or two examples in Tunisia. I think the revolution was not revolutionary enough. What I mean by that is that we failed in the transitional justice. This was one of the biggest failures in Tunisia. I'm against, of course, the fact of cutting heads, of anyone who worked with the old regime. You need to, what happened in Iraq with the Ba'ath. This is not a good strategy. But then what happened in Tunisia, we targeted the wrong people, we targeted many persons, and because they worked with the Ben Ali regime, we put them in jail and tried to prosecute them, etc. But then many other peoples who were influenced in the establishment of the dictatorship of Ben Ali, they were not, they continued and they came back again and they tried to interfere again in the public life and politics and media. Look to the media, for example, in Tunisia. The ownership of the media before and after the revolution is almost the same. So media is pillar of a democracy, but then we cannot continue with media being owned by the same person before and after the revolution. Because before the revolution, if you own a media, it means that you are close to the regime, that you are working for the dictator, so you cannot continue. This is just an example. So media, for example, were not able to self-regulate themselves and to become really free, independent media. So the transitional justice was a big failure in Tunisia. It turned to be just a compensation for the Islamists because they were persecuted in the Ben Ali regime. And until now, we did not know exactly what happened, how the dictator imposed his rules and how he succeeded to become Ben Ali, 23 years of strong regime, etc. So the fact that we failed in the transitional justice was a big mistake. And this is something important for any revolution in order to succeed. Another mistake, for example, is I consider the writing of a new constitution was not maybe something. I mean, we lost 2 years and a half in the writing of a new constitution. And by the way, this is also for Syria, because there's a momentum. The world is watching you. The world is trying to help you. So if you spend 2 years and a half writing a new constitution and the achievement at the end is the writing of a new constitution, which is a good thing, but then people are expecting you in other things, and here is the point. If you go back to the Arab Spring, I am not sure that the Arab Spring was a pure call for democracy, as per se. I think maybe the elite was calling for democratic regime like we see in the Western country. The Tunisian elite is, mostly westernized and open and have cultural affinity with the West. But then if you go to the mass population, I think they did the revolution for more social equality, for better redistribution of the wealth. This is what they were expecting, especially because there is, and this is not only in Tunisia, also in Egypt or in all the Arab world, there is divide between in those countries, between the coastal area and the inner area of the country. And by the way, if you go back to the Arab Spring, it started with an act of humiliation of Mohammed al-Bouazizi, who immolated himself, the street vendor, the Tunisian street vendor, who immolated himself in Sidi Bouzid, which is a town in the inner area of the country at 200 kilometers from Tunis. So this feeling of injustice is very common in the Arab world, in the street. And they consider that this feeling is coming from the corrupted elite, their family, Ben Ali, Mubarak, etc., etc. So the revolution was not really done. I'm not sure that the young people that went to the street, they were calling for a democratic system. Same for Syria today. I'm not sure that they are really calling for a democratic system. But then they were more calling for better redistribution of the wealth. And this, they perceive that this is not happening. Especially the youth, and this creates kind of disillusion about why they did that. So again, I think the Tunisian experience is a very rich experience. It is very inspiring. Many things succeeded, many things were positive. We could do much better in the starting point. Another example is the political system that we choose. Coming from 23 years of dictatorship, we choose the system trying to avoid any power concentration, to avoid what happened with Ben Ali. So what we did, the people that wrote the constitution, they create a system that dispersed the power. If you look to the Tunisian political system, so the prime minister has certain prerogatives. The president is in charge of defense and Ministry of Foreign Affairs. The parliament took much more prerogative than it has, thanks to internal game of his internal procedures. And then we create all those, institutions like IVD, like, for example, for election, which is good. We create a commission in charge of the election to avoid that the Minister of Interior is in charge of that. This was good. But we created also 6 or 7 other institutional commissions like this. And at the end, we don't know who is accountable for that. Who is governing the country, the justice, the same. We went to a system 180 degrees on the system where the president is controlling everything. So we asked the judge to reform themselves. They were not able to do that. And I remember any time that the government tried to help them, you are interfering in justice. So I think the choice was driven by this thinking of avoiding the concentration of power in the same hand, and it ended with dispersing the powers. And this created a lot of instability, by the way. There was like more than 10 governments in Tunisia between 2011 and 2021. Even my government, I'm the longest to serve, and I spent 3 years and a half, but I had to change my government 3 times because of this political system. I can give you a concrete example. If I want to appoint a minister, I need to get the vote for this. So I'm not sure to have the best skilled person for this position. I need to get the vote of the political groups in the parliament. So this is number 1. Number 2, if I want to fire minister or remove him, how can I reappoint another minister? I have to go through the vote another time. So this is make your leadership much more difficult, and make your ministers working more for their political parties, maybe than for the government or for the prime minister, and it creates for sure a leadership problem. So I think many things like that, many mistakes. The electoral code, for example. Remember, we were writing a constitution in Tunisia, so we tried to have an electoral code that is involving the maximum political faction, which is good. To write a constitution, you need to have diversity. But then after we keep this electoral code, and this prevented us of having a strong majority that govern and a minority that oppose. And this obliged us to make this consensus between secular and Islamist, and that was not well perceived. President Beji decided to make a consensus after we won the election in 2014, and our voters did never accept that because we did a campaign against the Islamists, and then the president decided to involve them in the government just because he thought that this is what we should do to stabilize the country in this difficult period. So I think we did some mistakes in the just after the revolution. Another big mistake was the hiring of thousands of people in the public service. You know, the wage bill in Tunisia was multiplied by 3, I think, in 10 years between 2010 and 2020. So, and this is important because if you spend your money paying salaries and retirement and things like that, you are not spending this money in creating jobs in developing region. And we are a country that is under fiscal stress, so we don't have a lot of resources. So I think we could better use this money instead of hiring people that we don't need really in the public service, just to give them a job, to help them for entrepreneurship or improve our education system and the link to the between the labor market and the education. So we did a lot of mistakes in the beginning that impacted the trajectory, the economic trajectory of the country and the political trajectory, and make it much more difficult for us. Terrorism was also another factor that impacted the Tunisian transition because we were hit. I mean, the terrorist groups were not happy that democracy is being this type of regime in an Arab Muslim country. So they attacked Tunisia many times immediately after the revolution. And this obliged us to spend a huge amount of money to fight. My first goal when I arrived to government was not to improve the economy, was to fight against the terrorism. Because if you have terrorist attacks in your country, you cannot talk about economy or job creation, or you have to stabilize. The country was, by the way, remember that when I arrived, Tunisia was, there was a travel ban from all the countries in the world and preventing their people to travel to Tunisia. So the tourism was down and foreign currency was low. So, you know, all those things impacted the economic, the transition in Tunisia and put it in, let's say, in the wrong direction. But then also there was positive behavior of many political actors like UGTT, like the army, like security forces at a certain crucial time that helped the democracy to continue.
You've focused a bit more on some of the mistakes you thought were made following the revolution and in the decade that followed. One thing that struck me, and maybe you as well, Ian, I'll be interested to see if you agree, was Tunisia did not rush into elections. I remember at the embassy we used to get visitors off the record. We called some of them diplomatic tourists, but we got a lot of visitors who wanted to see the revolution in Cairo and then wanted to come to Tunisia and see the revolution. The more serious-minded of them, in effect, warned us that the Egyptians were rushing too quickly into elections, and it was better to focus on the Constitution. I think maybe the Constitution took a little longer to write than originally envisioned, although not any longer than the first Constitution following independence took to write. But it seemed at the time, and particularly seems in retrospect, that it was the right move to proceed at a judicious pace on that. And so my question is, and feel free to disagree with me, but my question's two-part. One is, do you agree or disagree with that? And then the second is, either way, what advice would you give to people in Syria as they try and construct their new form of government?
Yeah, of course, it's easy to tell after war. You know, it's easy to give lesson after only.
Sure.
I mean, I'm not trying to give any lesson to the Syrian or even. I think in Tunisia, I mean, first point, the difference between what happened in Tunisia and in Egypt. This is an important thing, you know. Why? I mean, in Egypt, the process was started by the military. Why? Because I think there's two main differences. Number one is that there is a long history of reformism in Tunisia that created what I call moderate Islam. Muslim Brotherhood in Tunisia are different from the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt. This is thanks to a long secular tradition in Tunisia, even before President Bourguiba. But President Bourguiba was the one who really implemented this secular tradition. The Islamists in 2011 in Tunisia, they won with 37% of the votes, which is helped them to govern, but it's not the 71% of Egypt. If you add Hezbollah in Egypt and the other, the Islamist party, they got 71%. So there is no other room, no alternative possible. In Tunisia, we kept this alternative that the secular we're waiting for the next election, maybe we can win in the next election. And this is what happened exactly. If the Tunisian Islamists won with 71%, maybe they will think about implementing Sharia or the rule, things like that, and this will give different trajectory. So I think that the long history of reformism in the Tunisian Islam and President Bourguiba, the status of women, played an important role. That because when I'm saying that 37% voted for Islamists, means that 63% voted against Islam. But our camp as secular was divided. So everyone created his own political party, including myself, until President Bergi in 2014 succeeded, and this was a positive political behavior to put everyone under Media Tunis to win the election. Second difference, I think, is in the what I call the civil society. The Egyptian civil society is 100% Islamic civil society. In Tunisia, there is non-Islamist civil society. Like all civil society, even under the dictatorship of Ben Ali, like UGTT, like UTICA, like the Tunisian Bar Association, they played a role because after the revolution, the party, the RCD party, who was in charge of ruling the country for decades, was dislocated. So we don't have only the Islamists were able to reorganize themselves quickly. In this period, the UGTT and those civil society played an important role in order to balance the power of Nahda. And this allowed the game to continue and maybe prevented security forces to intervene like they did in Egypt. So I think the fact that there is this, there's a lot of bridge, by the way, between the civil society and political party in the beginning. Many of the leaders of Media Tunis are coming from UGTT or from UTICA, and waiting for Media Tunis to become a political party to confront the Islamists. The unions played a positive role in 2012, 2013, and this is what helped the Tunisian experience to continue. And this prevented the interference of the security forces because there is still an alternative possible, So those are, I think, differences with Egypt, where the process was stopped immediately. And I think those structural component and this behavior of some political actors in Tunisia, including unions, helped us to have this experience continuing despite the difficulties. But then back to the constitution, I saw that the Syrian, for example, they have many constitutions. They have even a constitution that was written by the Russian. I saw that like a few years ago, proposed by the Russian. So, but then they have serious good constitution, including giving rights to minorities, etc. So maybe now the focus is we can have an expert committee trying to write a constitution quickly and vote it. The goal of the Syrian now, no one elected Hayat Tahrir al-Sham in Syria. No one gave them a mandate. And I think they have to understand that what happened is not only their victory, it's the victory of the Syrian people. As I mentioned, there was no real confrontation. It is a self-dislocation of the regime of Bashar al-Assad regime. And so their role now is just quickly to unite the country, to dislocate all those organizations. Some of them are linked to international terrorism, maybe, and to give direction to the country and to hold election quickly, to have elected institution. And I'm afraid that trying to make a daily management of the situation because they have the experience in managing Idlib before coming to Syria, but Idlib is not Syria. Idlib is, it's not the same thing. And I think this is the goal now. They need to focus on that. Because if you spend a lot of time, you lose. There is a momentum now. The world is trying to help you. Maybe the world is watching you. If you come after 4 years and saying, "Okay, we have a constitution," okay, good thing. But for the population, you are not answering their needs. So this, I consider it. We can do better in Tunisia, but this was maybe one mistake among others. But there are other mistakes, like the fact that we did not elect a constitutional court. This was maybe a big mistake, and the parliament take responsibility for that, and everyone take responsibility. There is an increase in politicization of non-political actors. Unions, for example, as I mentioned, they played an important role in the beginning, but then they won the Nobel Prize. This was maybe a mistake from the international community. They should give the Nobel Prize to the Tunisian population, not to. Why I'm saying that? Because once they won the Nobel Prize, they became stakeholder in the governing. They were asking for position in the government and placing their people. So they went out of their role. And this is valid. This is valid for many NGOs, and there is a very increasing politicization of all actors, NGOs. We saw also NGOs that start under the umbrella of NGOs to have foreign funding. Then they turn to political parties, taking advantage of the fact that the legal framework was not really clear, and so. I see a lot of mistakes, but then it's not an experience that we need to forget or to cancel. It's a lot of lessons learned, and now we turn to another type of regime, but then same thing. There is no constitutional court today. Where is the constitutional court that we were blaming the dark decade about that? Today there is no constitutional court. There is no elected judiciary council, at least before there's one. So. We're not taking lesson of the past. We are unfortunately, but this may be all those mistakes. And then another important factor was the rise of populism that happened in the world. But in Tunisia and in this fragile institution, it has big impact to delegitimize the institution in Tunisia. This played a huge role. This combination between populism and social networks. And this really impacted the confidence and the trust of the Tunisian system. And the problem with political party is that they use that. Everyone used that to attack an enemy, to attack something was the government of the country, trying to play on this fake news, etc. And at the end, the trap was closed on everyone. This is what happened. The short story.
We focused a fair amount on Tunisia. You've been modest in focusing more on some of the mistakes that were made. I'd like to, and you touched on the international community, but I'd like to get back to that. And you mentioned Deauville in particular, which is a sore point for me, so I'm going to stand on it for just a minute. For my students who aren't familiar with Deauville, the revolution happened. Ben Ali fled January 14th, 2011. Toward the end of May in 2011, the G7 summit was in Deauville, France. Not to put too fine a point on it, since Sarkozy was pretty supportive of Ben Ali. It was a little bit like the coyote in the Roadrunner commercials. He was trying to get back on the firm ground, and he announced, as you suggested, some phenomenal amount of assistance. He did it without coordination with I think anyone else in the G7.
I think the initial amount was $40 billion.
Yeah, it was.
Then Sarkozy doubled the amount.
Yeah,
just to show that I'm not a friend of Ben Ali.
Yeah, it was. But the problem was that well, there were lots of problems with it. One of the problems for the Tunisian government at the time was people said, well, these are the leading democracies meeting. They're pledging all this money. Where's the money? And many people concluded incorrectly, but not you can understand logic chain. Oh, the government must have put it into the personal pockets. Okay, end of rant. I apologize, but that's the background. But the more serious question here is, what opportunities do you think the international community missed, and including, and I'd certainly put the United States in, I mean, I think we did lots of good stuff, but I think we also missed a lot of opportunities.
Yeah, I think, of course, we cannot, there was for sure a clear declaration of support to the Tunisian democracy from the Western countries, for sure, yeah. And there is I believe they were honest in saying that. They were really trying to help the Tunisian democracy. But this is, unique experience was no one was prepared for that. I think they were missing some qualitative help. I'll give you some examples of that. And by the way, this is valid also for the Syrian revolution. In the beginning, the first years, we need some accompaniment to avoid the mistakes that I was talking about. Many mistakes we can maybe, if we have more engagement, of course, I'm not asking to interfere in the Syrian choices or the Tunisian choices, but of course, the Western power or countries that are used with democracy, they have much more experience of that. And we are not prepared, and we did many mistakes. I think if there was better accompaniment in the beginning, we could avoid hiring 200,000 persons in the public service. We could orient this money to, as I mentioned, big jobs. But then, if you look to the decade, let's talk about Europe. Europe used to help Tunisia with almost 200 million euro per year. This is the amount on average that Tunisia received from the European before the revolution. And we went from 200 million euro to 300 million euro on average the last decade, in between 2010 and 2020, which is 100 million euro more, which is peanuts for 27 countries. They really think that Tunisia needs to be a democracy, and it is their interest to have security in Tunisia, that Tunisia is stable to avoid immigration, illegal immigration. So I think, and those 300 millions are loans. It's not a donation. It's not, this is money that the next generation should pay. So this is not really, we just increased by $100 million or euro, but we keep the same mechanism. There was no status given to Tunisia as a country in transition. And then I remember during a negotiation with the IMF or things like that, we have a war in Libya. We have destabilization in Libya with all those terrorist groups. Daesh was in Libya, and also we have a lot of terrorism in the Tunisian mountain, etc. So those are factors that impacted the revolution. But then we have a good cooperation with the US to fight the terrorism, and we succeeded, by the way. But this, of course, postponed your focus on the democratic transition. I give you just something. We had to almost multiply by 2 or 2.5 the budget devoted to Ministry of Interior and Defense between 2010 and 2018. So this is money. If you put this money to defend your borders and your security, to train your security forces, and as I mentioned, the US was crucial in that success. You're not using this money to create jobs. But then this is, and I think this is another externality, the rise of terrorism that happened between 2010 and 2020 with Daesh, ISIS, Boko Haram, all those groups, and with many Tunisians also that take advantage of that to join these groups in Syria and in Mosul, in Iraq, and in Afghanistan. So I think the international community, there was a support. They tried to help the Tunisian, but again, at the end of the day, we take responsibility of what happened, like Tunisian political class. I know that many are saying because it is because of Qatar or UAE. This is marginal. I mean, of course, any country has to defend its interests, which is fair, but it's not real interference in our affairs. If we failed in Tunisia, it is because of the Tunisian political class. And trying to say that it is because of the international community or this country, it is a way to not accept and take responsibility for things. look for the fight against terrorism, for example, when we make the law against terrorism in Tunisia, there was no national unity around that in the political class. I remember, I think there was like 30 members in the parliament, they vote against. They were not present in the assembly to vote because they think that this is something created by the West, by the imperialists. You know, there is this kind of thinking, as I mentioned, with the populism rising, with the social networks, etc. There was like 30 members. They were absent in this very important session of the parliament to vote for the Tunisian anti-terrorism law. This is, I consider it one of the negative behavior of the political actors that impacted the transition. The same thing when it was about voting for the Constitutional Court. That according to the Constitution, it should be voted 1 year after the vote of the 2014 Constitution. Maybe if we got the Constitution in 2015, maybe what happened in 2021, we could have a different path. Because we could have another opinion on that and to avoid this vacuum of no one can give a. So again, those are mistakes of the political class that we need to take lesson from, and our country like Syria can see what happened in Tunisia. And I believe that this guy Joulani, despite his former Qada person, we have to be really cautious, etc. But then he's taking lesson from what happened in the Arab Spring. I think he watched carefully what happened in Egypt and in Tunisia, and he's trying to avoid these mistakes.
Good. Let me open it up to questions from the audience. I'm sure Dr. Chahed would like to hear what's on your minds as well.
Hi, Belfer Center. I'm a PhD student here. Thank you for being here and you spoke a lot about the mistakes of the 10 years, and I work on Tunisia as part of my research, and I've heard this from multiple actors from different political backgrounds. But my question is, what now? Where do we go from here? How do we build back? Because one of the things you were talking about is when 2011 happened, you were not ready. And all of the political parties almost that I spoke to in Tunisia told me this, we were not ready, we didn't know what to do. How do we ensure that if this opportunity presents itself that we're ready this time?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I think part of the solution now is that we, political party, recognize their mistakes and acknowledge, including myself, of course. So every time I'm saying that, you say you also, of course. Everyone did mistakes, but we need this fair and free debate about what happened during this decade, what were the responsibilities, who is responsible, and I'm giving some examples, but also, of course, others can give other examples. Unfortunately, we never had this debate in Tunisia. The debate in the last few years turned to be attacks, everyone attacking the other, everyone accusing the other of being corrupted, working for the American, working for the West, for the imperialism. So if you look to the spectrum of the Tunisian political parties in the last 10 years, so it's easy to analyze. If you look to this, for example, Harakat al-Sham, which is the nationalist, everything is because of the IMF, the West, Israel, blah, blah, blah. This is what they're claiming, everything. If you look to what Tayyar are saying, everything is because of corruption. Not all corrupted. Just to be clear, it's not Qais Said who started this kind of speech. This speech started really early in 2012, 2013, and it increased during my time. I was accused of everything, because I appointed the Jew minister, René Trabelsi, in my government. Everyone is saying that I am working for the Zionism and blah, 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 So there was no political serious debate in Tunisia. Everyone was accusing the other. I remember when I go to the parliament, there was no serious debate about inflation, how to create jobs. I was talking, even during my presidential campaign, I was wrong to talk about those serious issues. Finally, I was really wrong because my competitor was, you are bad, you are corrupted, you are working. So if you look to the spectrum of the political party, if you look to the Islamists, many of them are saying that everything is bad because of the people of the old regime, of Ben Ali regime, and we should put those people in jail, blah, blah, many of them. If you look to the people of the old regime, they're saying everything is because of the Islamists, so we should put them in jail. So if you look to Al-Karama, those extreme right of Nahda, they were talking about the natural resources, the oil and gas that being taken by the US and the foreign. No one was serious about the problem of the country. ISIS took all these arguments and act on these arguments. What does it mean, act? He put everyone in jail.
this argument. But people during 10 years, with these arguments, with this political speech, far from the reality, people were indoctrinated. Every day you listen to a political class saying that, and this denied the value of work, of how we create value added in our export. No one was talking about serious problem. Only the government, not only my government, but also other governments. We tried to involve the political class in those serious debate, but we failed to do that. The debate was really a populist debate, trying to take advantage of the social networks to get points in your popularity. Everyone did that. Everyone did that. And the trap was closed on everyone on July 2021. Because Qais took all these arguments. Qais is not bringing any new argument, finally. We can talk about his project, but then he's repeating all those arguments, you know. The IMF is the tool of imperialism. We heard that many times in Tunisia before Qais used that. I mean, the Islamists are responsible about everything. We hear that for 10 years, you know. So then when you keep educating your people with those arguments, pushing with social networks, just thinking that this will help you to become popular or to get some points in the polls, you will create a bad negative environment for any election. And this started with 2019 election, when we see a rise of the populists, and then we see this debate in the parliament. People were dying with COVID, but then the member of the parliament were fighting on fights that did not interest the population. No one was talking about the vaccines or the purchasing power, and this is what led to July 2021. You know, the fight in the parliament, the COVID. Of course, 20,000 persons died with COVID. Tunisia has a good health system. You know, we could manage much better than that. But then the political class take responsibility, including, of course, Qais of that, and this led to what the situation we are living today. And everything started by that everyone recognized mistakes and a free, fair debate about what happened and what are the responsibility, what was positive in this decade. Let's compare it to now. No one is doing this job in Tunisia. Let's compare the inflation today to, I remember during my time when it was like 5 or 6% inflation, I had, you know, the government should be removed. Now, 2 years ago, we're around 9%. Last year, it was 8%. This year, it's 7%. There's shortages of food commodities every week in Tunisia, unfortunately. So there's no debate about the serious issues, and the political class take responsibility for that.
Youssef, thank you for your talk. I wanted to take you back to 2014. At the time, Tunisia had successful elections, and Nida Tunis won the elections, had practically the majority in parliament.
Yeah, 86 seats. Yeah.
Executive power. Just my simple question, what went wrong?
Yeah, good question, you know. First, the political system. I mean, of course, everyone is criticizing President Beji Qaid about his decision to have a government with the Islamists. And by the way, no one was aware of that. It was a deal between President Beji and Rashid Ghannouchi. Maybe Ambassador Gray can tell more about that.
You flatter me.
I know a little bit. Anyway, so of course the system obliges you, because to have a majority in the parliament, you need 109 votes. You need the majority is around 109. I'll give you what happened. We have a huge majority in my government, National Government of Unity. I got like 169 votes. Okay, so everyone was saying the government is comfortable because you have a large majority. But let me tell you that in the reality, we never reached the 1-9. You know, we were looking to the people from the opposition to come and to find some consensus with them, because the member of the parliament were absent. They were in their region. They were traveling. They were not here. So to get this 109, sometimes we should call the opposition and find consensus. So this make the law empty from there. Those are not the law of the government. I'll give you another example here. When I did the law to fight illicit
how we
Illicit
call this?
enrichment.
Illicit enrichment, asking every person in the government to declare about their assets and about what they, when they come to office and when they leave. I did this law in the fight against corruption. So we prepared a law looking to other experience in other countries that have that. It was around 2,000 persons that were concerned by declaring the ministers, the public service, high-level persons, etc. It went to the parliament. And then we have this debate of everyone was saying, why this guy, everyone needs to declare. We end with 350,000 persons that needs to declare. So it became a law that we cannot implement, And this because of this rise of populism. This majority was really not really strong as we can think. So I think the political system obliged President Beji to make this consensus with the Islamists. And this, of course, this is not a natural alliance, to be honest. We did a campaign against the Islamists, then we find ourselves with them, even if we give them a very low participation in the government. In my government, there was like 35 ministers, maybe 2 or 3 for the Islamists, which is not their real weight in the parliament. So, but this was the deal. This is another story. And then I think Nida Tunis was not strong enough because it was an electoral party. And once President Beji was elected and went to the palace of Carthage, no one was able to run the party. And again, the problem was the son of President Beji in a period when the Tunisian really did not accept the family interference. And this was my fight with the president because of his son. And I explained to him that Tunisia now is a democracy and we cannot accept that. And this, of course, was, I think President Beji played a huge role in the survival of the Tunisian experience, but then he was not able to control his family and his son. And his son interfering in the state affairs. And this, of course, is very negative. And this gave a bad impression to people, We did a revolution against Ben Ali regime, then we find ourselves another family. And yeah, again, the behavior of the political actors in Tunisia was good at crucial. I'm trying to analyze that at the crucial moments, Maybe in 2012 it was positive, then it same for UGTT, They played a very positive role in the beginning, but then at the end they were trying to have ministers. This is not your role, to interfere in the calling to collapse the government. They fighted with me to collapse the government many times. So we went with a system that everyone went out of his legal, normal place.
Thank you.
We get one online.
We have a few, so I'll try to combine them into one. So the first one is you spoke about the mistakes of the Tunisian government, but what were some of your mistakes? Is there anything in particular you feel you could have done differently during the mandate? And then the second question asks if you can comment on your role in the battle for control of the Tunis. And we've been a good sense of
Yeah, my mistake, I was too democratic. I was too nice with it. Look what happened now. I mean, to be serious, all those people now that are in jail, political prisoners, journalists, I think the most one they attacked was me. Yeah. But then it was not a reason to put them in jail. I never did that. I could do that. This was the easiest thing, By the way, they need to be released. You cannot continue managing this country with all these people leaving the country or being in jail. And then I think this is the democracy, you need to accept. So I think I did mistakes in terms of communication, especially in 2019. I was in a period where there is this rise of social networking. The government is not ready to react, and not only the Tunisian government, The speed of the information that we have today in the social networks, as a government, you cannot go and clarify every 2 minutes because you can have a new information every 2 minutes. Look what President Trump is doing. He's making a press conference every day. Every day. He has a chance to clarify everything every day, which is smart. I find that. I should do that. I was really bad in my communication in 2019, the last year. And this because I let those lies increasing about the government, about
the politician, etc. And I was just asking other politicians to make some ethics. And I remember I proposed for them a chart, something around ethics, that we stop attacking everyone without proof, without. So I think I was not good in my communication at the end. I could communicate much better because, again, in the government, it is important to have a vision. Vision is the most important thing in your leadership, but then you need to connect the people to your vision. If you don't connect your people to your vision, I can give you an example. I remember in my campaign, I was saying that I was successful in reducing the public deficit from 7% to 3%, which was a huge achievement, About this deficit, People, they don't care about the public deficit. Unless if you say clearly what's this, why this will impact inflation and your future, blah, 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 etc. So I think I did wrong in the communication. Maybe, of course, certain choices, of course, I was not good in choosing maybe certain people, maybe certain ministers, for sure, you can't, 3 years and a half, for sure, it's a human work, so you make mistakes. But then I tried to do my best for my country. And I think, finally, the 2019 election is the beginning of the Tunisian democratic collapse. Not because I lost, but because, we started there, the parliament was really divided. We were not able to unite ourselves as a progressive camp. This is also another problem of behavior of the political actor. We were able to do that in 2014. In 2019, we were like 27 candidates in the presidential election. Maybe 6 or 7 from Nida Tunis, 9, including myself. 9, including ministers from my government, We were not able to unite, and if you add our vote, of course, the president will be one of us. But we went into those fights against each other. Nahda also played a little bit with that, because they have the right, good role in that. But then this was a big mistake, and so I think everyone needs to recognize mistakes, and I'm ready to discuss other mistakes, that other thing. But of course, true mistakes, not that I am working for I don't know who, all those lies and all those things,
Great. Question in the back.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Chahed, for being here. The first question, you made a very good point as to why Syed shouldn't be popular right now. There's high inflation, food shortages, unemployment is still very high, brain drain. Really, the only problem he seems to have solved is the concentration problem you were referring to earlier, where he's concentrated power underneath him. Yeah, if you look at any air barometer poll, if you look at the election results, albeit very low turnout, he is wildly popular in Tunisia. So why do you think that is? And then what factors would actually make that change?
Yeah, I think he keeps some popularity because the ground was prepared for him. As I mentioned, this did not happen overnight. During 10 years, we explained to the Tunisian that the politicians are corrupted. Businessmen, if they are rich, they are corrupted. We explained that. The politician played that role. I'll give you an example, and some politicians were more populist than Kaysai, of course. Look, I remember in the parliament, we had a law by Harakat al-Shab asking the government to employ every educated person that is unemployed for the last 10 years, everyone, maybe like 30,000 persons. This is great. This is really populist. This was prepared by Harakat al-Shab and voted by the parliament. And I remember the member of my party, they told me we cannot vote against. I told them, don't vote, don't go to the parliament. You cannot assume that. The law was voted, hiring everyone in the public service just because you are unemployed for the last 10 years. This is a certain understanding of the state, this is, and the political party played on that. And guess what? Who rejected this law? Kaysai. He refused to sign this law. So Kaysai did better than this political party. Just to show you that the ground was prepared for Kaysai during 10 years. It just was like a low-hanging fruit. He came, take advantage of this populism and expand his narrative to implement his power for the last decade, saying that everything is bad on that decade, etc. But people were prepared. Tunisians are really linked to Facebook and TikTok and all these social networks. Political class, there was a populist speech, but also they were not able to have a serious debate. And by the way, I think now this is part of the solution. We need to have this debate, and the NGOs need to play this role. They were not playing this role. And look, the NGOs today, they received the same treatment by Tunisian as political party. Tunisian, they don't trust them. Why? Because they were also working for the certain political parties. Each political party has a certain number of NGOs working for him. So this make a kind of delegitimation of the whole system, and ISID is taking advantage of that. But then, of course, it's not a sustainable situation. You cannot continue to run the country like this with those slogans. I think it come to an end now. You know, those after 5 years. You cannot continue to not take responsibility of everything, you know. So, you know, you are including 3 years of absolute power, you know. You should, I mean, maybe politician, we can see that before or other experts, but of course this is coming, you know. You cannot continue saying that this is the fault of the other. This conspiracy theory will come to an end soon.
There was another question way in the back.
Hi, thanks so much for being here today. I think it's fair to say that American civil society that supports democracy and governance in this moment is kind of in shambles and scrambling and in some ways being deconstructed. And a lot of these organizations, such as the National Endowment for Democracy, the National Democratic Institute, these kinds of civil society organizations are being tarred by the US government with criticisms that other governments have long said that they support regime change and instability and the importation of foreign values, things like that. So if the American democracy and governance support space, like democracy and government development, is able to rebuild in the next few years and sort of privatize, divest from the US government more, how would you recommend that these organizations do better, I guess, in supporting democracy across the Middle East and highlighting more that they're trying to support the will of the people rather than sort of a Western or foreign?
I mean, from the Tunisian experience, I can say that many NGOs are something crucial to the democratic debate. They played a huge role in Tunisia. Again, certain roles were positive, others were negative, but same happened to them. You know, they were evolving in the same environment. They become politicized. You know, they become under a huge politicization. That's why people rejected them. And you know, I think the US government or any foreign government that try to help civil society needs really to be sure where they're spending their money. I give you an example. I mean, I was really open and I was attacked by many NGOs during the electoral campaign, for example. iWatch released what they call Chahed meter. Trying to evaluate the government, which I was fine with. But they did that 7 days before the election. I can discuss their assessment of what they're doing, but now the last year they did it 7 days before the election with ISID. Look where now they're in trouble. You know, he's prosecuting them, closing their assets. I think, you know, of course, I don't agree with what he's doing, but also. Why you didn't do that for another candidate? Why are you doing that only for me? I have, for example, Minister of, I don't know, who is running for this election. You could also make his meter, you know. So they aren't playing a role. I consider they aren't playing a political role, and I'm sure that the money that was given to them was not for that, you know. So I think they play a good role, but then we have to control also a little bit what they're doing and not just giving them tools like that. But then, of course, maybe I can end saying that their role was more positive than negative. We better have them with their problem than to not have them at all.
Yeah, thanks. I had a follow-on to the very first question about what next for political parties. What can be done about cultivating a new political class, especially, you know, given how disillusioned the young people are?
This is what I tried to do. When I was appointed in 2016 as Prime Minister, all the political class fought against me from day one. No one accepted my appointment because I was not part of the eco-political lobbying system that existed from a long time, as I was 39 years old at the time. So I tried to create that, and I faced a lot of what we call the deep state and the establishment that were not happy if they accept you unless, if you belong to this either regional lobby or business lobby or this. There are a lot of lobbies in Tunisia, by the way, it's a small country. And I tried to fight with them and to create this new generation by appointing many persons and important position. The idea is that I think there's a legacy of that. Not only what I did, but also the 10 years of freedom created a generation of people that really, I hope they will not accept to live in the dictatorial, autocratic regime. I think there's a legacy. I'm not sure there is a national Tunisian identity, democratic identity or a democratic institution, but I think there is a hope with certain generation that was involved in, and we see that, they're still active in certain environments. So we should rely on these people for the future of Tunisia. Many were involved in NGOs, in political parties. Of course, they're missing some leadership, and we are missing. And by the way, I think people in Tunisia now, they think that there is no alternative, and that's why this helped by Said to not be challenging and making everything with no opposition. So I hope there is this democratic identity in the Tunisian youth now, or at least in part of them, that will help to create this new generation, which is really crucial. It's crucial to have a new generation of Tunisian politics. The region. And globally speaking, if you go to the region, it's a big problem of leadership. This is a big problem of leadership, governance, driving the change. We don't know how to do that. We were not trained for that. Globally speaking, those are management techniques and things that we should implement in our education system. And we are really, countries like the UAE or the Saudi now are becoming attractive because they're training their leaders for this type of techniques.
Youssef, going back to the 2011 revolution, ultimately, Ben Ali was able to rely on police, Ministry of Interior, the RCD, to suppress dissent, and until ultimately they were challenged. And Ben Ali, unlike the leaders in Egypt and Syria, was not able to turn to the army and get the army to go out and suppress the uprising. And that, I think, a lot of other autocrats in the Arab world drew as a lesson that they weren't going to make that mistake. I understand the context is very different now, although it's depressing to see how repressive the current regime is, and perhaps I'd be interested if you think it's like worse than it was in the bad old days of Ben Ali. And is the position of the Tunisian army any different now than it was in 2011?
Good question. Maybe no. Maybe no. I think the Tunisian army is professional army, trying to be a political army, following the order of the chief of army. I think this is what happened in July 2021, and then following the will of the people. The will of the people, the desire of the Tunisian people was yes, Ben Ali in 2011. The will of the people in 2021, people were supporting us. Because again, people thought that high society will deliver them from this political class. Everyone thinks that this political class is the reason of our problems. They are corrupted, the business class, he created a narrative. High side was strong in having in politics, you need to have a narrative.
He has a narrative, so everyone was convinced with that. And of course, no one was expecting that the event will take this direction. But if you go back to July 2021, I think including the army, people really believe that he will reform the system, that we agree that the system was having a lot of problems and we should try to find a solution. The parliament was, by the way, this happened in July 2021. In January 2021, I went publicly saying that this parliament cannot continue and we need to stop this parliament. But of course, I was not thinking to stop the parliament like he did, but I asked for other elections. But of course, we saw that the situation was not able to continue. And I say that 6 months before. And the COVID was here. And so at that time, I think the army supported him because they thought that the population, this is the will of the population, and Tunisian went to the street. But then, he turned to have another project and to try to take advantage of the situation to expand his project, and now we are paying a high price for that.
Hi, Amy McCampbell, student here at the Elliott School. Thank you so much for coming out. I really appreciate your time. In your personal experience, what were the most effective tools and mechanisms you've used in anti-corruption campaigns during your administration?
Yeah. This was when I arrived at the government, I was given 5 priorities. Number 1 is fighting terrorism. Number 2 is fighting corruption. And when I arrived, there was no legal framework for the government to fight corruption. This is number 1. This is the first thing that I see. But then it was very popular request from the population because from that time, people start to think that everything is about corruption. Let's talk about corruption. I will maybe surprise you. Tunisia is a middle country in terms of corruption. But then if you go there now, everyone is talking about corruption. We think that we are the most corrupt people, which is not true. Listen, and now Kaysad is fighting corruption, okay? 2 days ago, there was the Transparency Index, the international perception of corruption. Tunisia get its worst ranking in the history, maybe 92. In my time, we were 73. We lost 19 places. When now we are supposed to be in the middle of the fight against corruption. Because fighting corruption is not just blah, 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 it's not just arresting people and jailing people. Fighting corruption is to create first a legal framework. This is what we did. I did all the legal framework to the fight against corruption. And by the way, the Prime Minister after me, yes, Fakhfer, he was not able to continue because of the law that we did. Which was not true, by the way, we accused him of not declaring his assets before starting his position, and we used that. So I did the legal framework, creating a court in the region, administrative court, to help people go in the region, make their cases. I make the financial court that was able to control the election and give a detailed report for the monitoring of the election. This law against enrichment, illicit enrichment, and that you need to declare, many things. Legal framework was absent. Then what we are missing until now is the education. People think that corruption is only at the level of government, chief of state, chief of minister. No, there's this is what we call little corruption. We have to fix that, and it's a problem of long-term education. And so this is, but then the political propaganda is that the politicians are corrupted. And as I mentioned, Tunisia ranking in 2019, we have the same ranking than Bulgaria. No one knows that. Bulgaria, which is it's not the best country in Europe in terms of fighting against corruption, but it's an European country. We were ranked like 68, I think, or 69. But by the way, now we are 92. So Kaysad need to answer to that. Where is the fight against corruption that is leading for the last 3 years? We are losing places. We had our worst ranking. So, this is the fair debate that we need to have, and Tunisia needs to be aware of that. And we need to stop lying to them on those lies, fight against corruption. It's not a slogan. But then fight against corruption is the most difficult thing.
I mean, I think I was created politically with the fight against corruption. I get huge popularity for 2 years because I started that. And then until now, I'm getting attacked because of that. What happened, it was all the Tunisian class used the fight against corruption as a fond commerce, as something that helped them to exist, because everyone likes that. When I did this was of course just speeches and talking and political discourse. When I did the fight against corruption, I took from them this thing. So I threatened them politically. I became very popular. I was #1 in the poll for the 2 years. Before 6 months before the election, I started declining. They started attacking me. It bring me a huge number of enemies, this fight against corruption. And then, of course, the real corrupted people were also attacking me, and there was kind of alignment of interest between the political class and the real corrupted person to avoid, and they did what they call everything but Youssef Chahed for the 2019 election, and this is how I lost the election. This is how Qais Said won the elections.
Christian, we had something online.
So you've spoken a lot tonight about how public debate is an important step towards establishing democracy. What do you think of the Truth and Dignity Commission's work, creating space for public debate as one of their main objectives? Do you think it has failed at generating debate, and if so, why?
Yeah, the IVD, this is, just to explain, this is a commission that was established just after the revolution to tell the truth to the Tunisian about the dictatorship regime, how it used to work, etc. And by the way, the leader of this commission is in jail also, and by the way, I call for the release of all of them. Abil Moussi also is in jail. Samir Dahmani, many journalists, I mean, Mahdi Bengharbi, a lot of people, a lot of my ministers are in jail for no reason now, and they need to be released, again, a lot of politicians, I mean, a lot of journalists, Bughaleb and other, that were most people that lies about me, But then it's not a reason to jail them, those are, this is, if you wanna, and this lady also, I consider that she really failed in the management of the IVD. Because, I mean, first, I think the transitional justice needs to be done in like 2, 3, 4 years after. Until 2019, she's still working on her reports. You lose the momentum, You cannot come 9 years after to explain to us. People are in, they're looking to other things. Under the pressure of the Islamists, the IVD turned to be just how to compensate financially the Islamists that were persecuted. They were persecuted in the Quran. But then, we can compensate them. But this is not the sense of the transitional justice. We need to explain the mechanism, how Ben Ali used to avoid repeating the same mistakes. And this was not done, to be honest. Clearly, we make a law giving her all powers. When I was in the government, she never tried to work with us. She was taking decision without consulting the government. For example, she was going to the World Bank, asking the World Bank to give compensation to Tunisia for the 20 years of cooperation that impacted the economy, something like that. You should consult the government before doing that. We have our opinion. Or going to France to ask for compensation or things like that. So I think was a mistake. The law was really trying, the sense of the laws that were drafted just after the revolution, trying to avoid any control of the executive power. And we gave her a lot of power, no control. She was not able to deliver until 2019. She was asking to give her more time, etc. And then we lost the momentum, and people were saying, "Why you give money to the Islamists or to the leftist people that were persecuted? I did this money for me. We have other poor people." So I think there was she failed in the management of these big things, and then her team turned against her, and but then again, her place is not in jail.
We have time for 2 more questions. You have a question?
Hi, my name is Lina. So as I'm Tunisian, I'm a medical student at GW. And I just was wondering, based on my experiences when I go back to Tunis and talk to people, a lot of the younger generation, like people my age, feel very like hopeless about the future and like about rebuilding Tunis and if that's even possible. They see successes like leaving Tunis instead of investing in the country. So I just was wondering what your thoughts were on to re-inspire Tunisian people.
By the way, the last Arab barometer is showing those dramatic number for Tunisia. Tunisian youth are looking to leave the country now because the situation is no longer acceptable for them. At least they used to have freedom of speech. Now they're threatened for that. So it's and by the way, I think the politician today, their main role is how to rebuild the trust. And if we reach this situation, it is because people lost their confidence in their country. That's why they're leaving in the future. This is the main thing. And they lost that because all the things and the mistakes that took place during the last 15 years. And I think now we should, with the civil society, try to rebuild this confidence. This is crucial for the future to avoid that this. And now we have another phenomenon this last weeks, a number of young people immolating themselves, like Zidane. We have an increasing number in the last weeks, which is a negative indicator. So I think the political class needs to, as I mentioned, recognize mistakes in order to rebuild this confidence and this trust, especially with the youth, and for the interest of the country. We cannot. This is very alarming number. People are not. The legal immigrants that are traveling to Europe, even legal one, that are not coming back to their country. So it's a really alarming number, and I think if we don't succeed to rebuild the confidence, and this is our goal as politicians.
You've been very patient, thanks.
The title is Rebuilding Democracy. This stems from the Arab Spring, starting in Tunisia. There were hopes for democracy leading to prosperity. Didn't happen. I don't see how it can happen now. Question was raised about the United States cutting aid. We're going to impose tariffs. Where will the funding come from for prosperity? Where will the trade? But there is another issue now. Look at King Abdullah's meeting with President Trump in the Oval Office. Look at the expression on his face. He couldn't contradict President Trump in the office, but you can see on social media, he is being mocked for looking too weak. My concern is we could be headed for another Arab Spring, another wave of revolutions, even more extensive and more violent than the one in 2011.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, I think the democracy will come in waves of democracy. And regarding the aid, I mean, I'm against the cutting the aid for Tunisia. I think it's not because this aid is for the Tunisian people. Anyway, but this is a debate. I'm not sure that this has strong impact in relation on Tunisia. I mean, it's not something easy, but then I think that, of course, if you go to the Arab street today and ask people, maybe they will say that the best form of governance is not democracy. Maybe they're just looking for a strong man that fix the economy. And not only in the Arab world, by the way, no, it can be everywhere else now. So this is also impacted by the way the Tunisian experience. Representative democracies in the last decade were in difficult condition, not only in Tunisia. And this impacted the democracy in Tunisia. There were a lot of democracy were suffering, but the difference that in all established democracy, you have strong institutions, which is not the case in Tunisia. That's why it was easy to reverse the course quickly, and destroy all the achievements. But then, of course, I think we should, if we really believe in democracy, we should continue the fight. And then today, for example, 5 years after what happened in Tunisia, I mean, Kais Saied is governing the country for the last 5 years, including 3 years of absolute power. But the economy is not fixed. It is worse than before. So this showed that first, it's not democracy that was responsible about the Tunisian economic results. And now look to the situation. But then, yeah, this was an experience. We need to learn from it. We need to recognize our mistakes. I think continuing support to democracy is crucial. And if you compare the countries that are living in democracy, I mean, less and less countries are living in democratic system today, including globally speaking. You know, there is a kind of backsliding in worldwide now. And then we have tried to, because people think that they're not electing a person that are working in their interest. It's not only in Tunisia, look in Europe, this is happening, you know. So we should to find a way how to strengthen our democracy, not only in the Arab world, I mean, not only in the nation democracy, but I think this experience will impact a lot. And I believe that there's a next wave coming. I'm not sure that the Arab world is against democracy, but maybe they need a democracy that deliver security, prosperity, and to be kind of responsible democracy. This is the goal at the end of the day. It's not just free speaking, but then by all means, democracy will deliver much better than any dictatorial regime.
I'm afraid that's all the time I think we have questions for, but I'd like to ask you to join me in a warm round of applause for our guests. Thanks everyone for coming. Appreciate it.